Hey, we've been talking about the subject of the Quran, and I wanted to continue letting them ask the questions and see what the answers are. And I think we'll start with the ladies again. Zia, what's your question?
Who compiled the Quran?
Who compiled the Quran? Well, that's a very good question. A lot of people ask about that because they wonder who actually wrote it down and how they put it together, how they decided what goes where. The fact is that the Quran was revealed to Muhammad over a period of 23 years. Bits and pieces, a little here, a little there. Sometimes a whole surah would come, or chapter, sometimes just a few words. And because Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, didn't read or write, he never had a book. He didn't walk around with a book in his hand and say, this is the Quran. He did it by memory, as most people did in those days. They would recall things and recite things to people, and that's what he did. There were some at his time who did read and write, and they wrote it on different forms. Some of them wrote it on the animal skins, like goats and sheep. They make leather hide, and then they write on it. Some people wrote it on big flat rocks. Others, they would write on these leaves called palm leaves, and that's how different people preserved it for themselves. In the beginning, there wasn't that much anyway, but they would memorize, and when more would come, they would go and tell each other, you know what was revealed today, and then they would share it with them, and that's how they memorized it, and that's how they passed it on. But the compilation of the Quran itself was done at the very end of the life of the Prophet, peace be upon him. In the last Ramadan, you know, Quran came in Ramadan, right? Originally. But the last Ramadan, before he passed away, the angel Jibril came to Muhammad, peace be upon him, and actually recited it with him the way Allah wanted it done, so that all of the Quran was in the order Allah wanted, and that was the last and final time for reviewing the Quran. And that, I think, helped you understand. As far as written down later, this is another story. But that was done by people who had memorized it, and some years later they said, let's go back and be sure what we're writing down is what we've all memorized. That's how it was done. Now I want to go to Ismail. Do you have a question? What is it?
Why was the Quran sent to Prophet, peace be upon him?
Why was it sent to Muhammad, peace be upon him, as opposed to somebody else? And why at that time? These are good questions. Let's consider this. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, was an Arab living in the desert with no real intellectual background as far as being schooled in anything. He didn't, as I already mentioned, he was illiterate. So this is the perfect one to give the Quran to, because in later years it became very evident. Even today, when people investigate what the Quran says, there's no way that a man living at that time and in that place with his limitations and restrictions could have made up something like this. The content of the Quran is too amazing to even begin to compare to what the lifestyle of somebody living then, without laboratories, microscopes, and telescopes, all the different things that we use today. He didn't have anything like that. And of course, they didn't even have. Too amazing. Even if a lot of people got together and tried to do it, they wouldn't be able to do it. So this is a good example. Another is the character of Muhammad himself. Muhammad, peace be upon him, was well known to everyone as being a Sadiq, the absolute. When he spoke, he said the truth. He never lied. Not once in his life did he tell any lies. Now, nobody can say that. I mean, how many people you know? Did you know anybody that never told a lie ever? Everyone has told some stories, you know? He didn't do that. He didn't even like to joke about, lies. If his jokes were, humorous and so on, but they didn't have lies in them. Another thing about Muhammad, peace be upon him, was his character. They knew that he was trustworthy. They called him the Trustworthy. That's one of his nicknames that they gave him. And if anybody gave him any trust, he always kept the trust. If he had any confidence, if they told him any secret, he wouldn't tell anybody. He was very good about these things. Also, talk about his physical side. He never drank alcohol. He also didn't go to their wild parties and do things like that. He didn't ever go with any girlfriends. He didn't do that. He never even got married till he was like 25 years old, and no girlfriends. And throughout his whole life, even when he was married, he was very true to his wife. So because of his fidelity, his truthfulness, and his commitment to truth and trustworthiness, Allah chose him to be the one to carry this beautiful message of truth and bring it to all of us. He's also a good example for us to live up to. And it's his wife, Aisha, who said, if you would like to see the Quran. Now, she didn't mean a book, because she also, like most of the people back then, was talking about Quran as recitation, not a book. She said, if you want to see Quran in motion, look to Muhammad. You want to see the Quran walking? Look to Muhammad, because he was the example. What the Quran teaches us, he did it. We wish we would be more like that. So this is a very good question you have. And what kind of question do you have for us, Father?
How did the Quran come? I want to know everything.
Okay. Well, first of all, it comes at a time when people really needed it. And it came to a people that really needed it. And it came at an example of a good man living with a lot of bad people. His own family, of course you love your family, even if they're bad. But he had a bad family. They all were bad people because they committed the worst sins of all, which is to worship other than Allah. They actually prayed to statues that they made with their own hands. They worshiped gods that they made up. So the Quran, when it came to these people. Not only did they have this kind of bad habit, they oppressed the women horribly. They did terrible things to women, including burying the little baby girls alive in the sand and letting them die, because they considered it bad to be a woman. If a girl was born, they hated it, that they would have a girl born in their family. And then they turned around and said that God had daughters. They did. They said God has daughters and they're angels. So they said the angels were girls. Allah answered that in the Quran and said, why do you attribute to me something you don't want for yourself? But for Allah, He doesn't have any sons or daughters. So there were a lot of things that the Quran cleared up for these people. But basically, it stopped them from this bad behavior and corrected their brain and corrected their heart. And first of all, there is God, and He's one. You believe in Him, and you do what He wants you to do. Then you have a good heart. You have to treat the people good and kind and nice. Not like some things we see today. Even some people claiming, oh, this is Islam, but it's not Islam. It's not what Islam teaches. But that's a very good question. And we have websites.